So welcome everyone. I'm Arnaud. I'm the spiritual program coordinator of Kala Chakra Center in Paris. We are very happy to have Venerable Sangye Kadro back with us. She's one of the most senior nun in our organization, and a very learned and accomplished and beloved teacher. So Venerable, we are very grateful to have you address this topic in a time when I think there is no shortage of stress. So I think it's really to the point topic. We will have two sessions. So this one will last until 6:30, so for 1 hour and a half. And then we will have 1 hour break. So if you want to have dinner, that's a good time. So between 6:30 and 7:30 Paris time. And then we'll start again at 7:30 until 9 p.m. So 1 hour and a half again. If you speak English, can you select the English channel in the translation? So in the small globe in the menu, because that's the way you are going to be able to hear Nadia when she translates French questions in English. There will be a time for questions at the end of each session. So if you can wait for that to ask question. And if you can switch your mic off if you are not speaking, so if you are not asking a question. And as much as possible, if you could switch your video on to make it more pleasant for Venerable and for all of us. Enjoy the teaching. Thank you.
Okay, bonsoir tout le monde. Nice to see all of you. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to again teach to the members of Kala Chakra Center. I've had many encounters with Kala Chakra Center, many chances to teach in that center over the years, so I feel very close. And Elizabeth told me she wasn't able to join today because she just had a cataract operation. So that's good. It helps to be able to see better. But yeah, she's recovering from that today. This is a really important topic we're going to be looking at today and tomorrow, because as we all know, there are many problems in the world, big problems, wars and natural disasters and climate change and so on. And then we also have in our own lives, we have many problems that happen to us. Yeah, losses and stressful situations. And so Buddhism has a lot of very practical tools that we can use when facing difficulties like these, so that we don't become overwhelmed by them and caught up in all kinds of disturbing emotions like sadness, grief, anxiety, despair, and so forth. So those kind of emotions, of course, it's natural that we experience those emotions. It's only natural. But we can learn how to manage our mind and our emotions and how to keep our mind up in a positive state, so that we don't drown in our disturbing emotions. And also the wonderful thing is that we can use these difficult situations in our practice of the Dharma, our practice of the spiritual path. And so instead of these difficulties bringing us down and hurting us, we can actually transform them into sources of more compassion, more wisdom, and other good qualities. So this is just really wonderful to be able to have the opportunity to do that. So that's what we're going to be looking at in this this course this weekend. And to start with, we'll recite some prayers. I think they will be shown on the screen. Yes, prayers to help us get into a good state of mind. So you can recite these prayers in English or French as you prefer. I'll do it in English. So if you're familiar with Buddhist prayers and you're familiar with the Buddha and you have confidence in the Buddha, you can imagine the Buddha in front of you, like the statue of the Buddha that you can see behind me. Although this is actually just this is what do you call it? It's just a screen. I don't actually have a Buddha statue, but it's on the screen. But anyway, that gives you an idea of what the Buddha looks like. So you can imagine that in the space in front of you is the Buddha made of light, not made of metal like a statue, not made of skin and flesh and bones like our bodies, but made of light, pure, radiant, transparent light. Very beautiful, very blissful. And that the Buddha has so many excellent qualities, like love and compassion for everyone, all beings throughout space, without excluding anyone. And he has incredible wisdom with which he understands everyone's minds, everyone's needs. He understands the true nature of things. So his mind is completely free of any kind of mistake, like ignorance, confusion, and afflictions like greed and hatred and arrogance. None of those afflictions exist in the Buddha's mind. His mind is totally pure, totally clear. So he has only positive qualities and a lot of skill, a lot of abilities with which the Buddha can help us and everyone else. And that's what the Buddha wants to do. He just like parents, when they bring a child into the world, they're totally dedicated to taking care of their child, doing everything they can to make sure the child has a good life. And so the Buddha has a similar attitude towards all of us and all living beings. He just wants to help us be free of suffering and problems, and he wants to help us to have genuine, lasting peace and happiness. So try to feel confidence in the Buddha that he does have these qualities and abilities. And then we direct our prayers to the Buddha and generate the wish that we can follow in his footsteps, develop the same good qualities in ourselves so that we too can benefit other people and other beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then the four immeasurables. These are four very beautiful, positive attitudes we develop towards other beings. Love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So do your best to develop those thoughts in your mind as we recite these words. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Okay, then there's the mantra of the Buddha. So let's recite that 3 times. Lama Yeshe used to do this at the beginning of his talks. And so it's a nice way of getting connected with the Buddha. And also just, calming down our mind, helping our mind be more calm and peaceful and in the present moment. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. Taya ta om mune mune maha munaye soha. So just sit quietly for a few minutes and really do your best to let your mind settle down. Put aside any thoughts you may have about what you were doing earlier today or what you're going to do later tonight. So put aside thoughts of the past and the future and just let your mind be in the present moment, right now and right here in the place where you are. And then do the best you can to bring into your heart feelings of compassion and love, caring about other people and other beings, wanting to help them. And then connect that with what we're doing in this course or seminar. Have the wish that what we're doing here, these talks, meditations, discussions, will be beneficial both to ourselves and to others, as many people and beings as possible, and the world. Okay, so we'll be doing more meditation later after I talk for a while and give some explanation. And I'll also leave some time at the end of each session. If you have questions you'd like to ask, I'll do my best to answer those. So, yeah, as I mentioned, what we're going to be focusing on in this retreat or course is methods we can use to deal with problems and difficulties. And I thought before we get into that, before we start looking at the actual methods for transforming problems into joy or into the path. And just by the way, the title of this seminar, something like How to Be Joyful in Stressful Times. Please don't think that just after these 2 days, you're going to be able to have great joy, happiness with difficult situations. Okay, it is possible to do that. It is possible to keep our mind positive and joyful and optimistic even when we face difficulties. But it takes time to learn how to do that, right? And so we can't, it wouldn't be realistic to expect immediately, like right away, we're going to be able to do it. But think of it more like learning to play the piano or some other musical instrument, right? So with a piano or a guitar or a violin, you can make beautiful music, right? You can make beautiful sounds. But to expect that after 1 lesson or 2 lessons that you're going to be able to do that, that's just not realistic, right? So, yeah, it takes time. Okay, you learn how to play and then you have to practice and train. And if you keep working at it, eventually you'll be able to make beautiful music. But so it's similar with this practice of keeping our mind positive and joyful even when we face difficulties. It is possible. It's definitely possible. But it's not something we can do immediately. And it does require some time and some effort to get to the point where we can do that. So I just want to make sure you don't have unrealistic expectations about what we're doing this weekend. Yeah. Okay, so I thought that it would be helpful to start by looking at some attitudes that we might have in our mind with regard to problems and difficulties that are not so helpful. So I made a file with the main points that I'm going to be talking about this weekend, and it's been translated into French, so that will be shown on the screen soon. Okay, so we're looking at letter A on this file. It says some attitudes that we might have about problems and difficulties. So as I go through these, do some introspection. Look at yourself, look at your mind, look at your experiences, and see if you can recognize any of these. So the first is to have this notion, life is wonderful. I shouldn't experience any problems. Bad things shouldn't happen to me. Yeah. So I think many people have this idea. Maybe we all do. We think, oh, life is just so wonderful and everything should go well. everything should work out just the way I want it to. I shouldn't experience any problems or difficulties in my life. Only good things should happen to me, not bad things. So we may not be fully aware that we have this attitude until we do encounter a problem. Okay? So when some kind of problem happens to us, for example, you get into a car accident, or you get sick, or something you have and you like gets stolen from you or gets damaged, or one of your friends does something hurtful to you, or even if the weather isn't the way you want it to be. Yeah, you were hoping to go out and take a walk, have a picnic, have an outing, and then the weather is bad and it rains and so on. So when things like that happen to us and we get upset, we feel upset, we feel unhappy. And if we look at our mind and look at what is going on in our mind, then you might notice thoughts like this. This shouldn't be happening. This shouldn't happen to me, right? Only good things should happen to me and not bad things should happen to me. And sometimes, we get upset, we get unhappy. We may have thoughts like, why me? Why is this happening to me? This isn't happening to other people, it's happening to me. Okay, so we need to look at our mind and see if we do have thoughts like that when problems happen. So what Buddhism says with regard to problems and difficulties is, first of all, ordinary unenlightened existence, what we call samsara, the term samsara, is not perfect. It's imperfect and unsatisfactory. So we use this term samsara. I know there's a perfume. I think there's a perfume. I don't know if it's made in France or not. Is it French perfume? A perfume called samsara, which is so funny. It's so ironic because, in Buddhism, the word samsara is associated with things that are unpleasant, whereas perfume, is associated with things that are pleasant. So it's really ironic. But anyway, so samsara is the word used in Buddhism for our ordinary existence when we're not enlightened beings. We're not like Buddhas, free of all suffering, problems, afflictions, but we still have suffering and problems and afflictions. So we're just ordinary and unenlightened beings. So the word for this situation is samsara. So according to Buddhism, we're in that situation. We're in samsara, and it's very imperfect. It's not perfect at all. And it's also not free of suffering and problems. There are lots of suffering, lots of problems. It's very unsatisfactory. And so, as a Buddhist, I mean, like somebody who's brought up in Buddhism, who's exposed to Buddhism from the time they're very young, they just accept that. They just accept, okay, there are Buddhas, there are these beings who have become free of samsara, and I can do that too, but right now I'm not free of samsara. I'm in samsara, and it's just the characteristic of samsara, the nature of samsara, that there are problems. That's just the way it is. And so they're with that attitude, then they don't get so upset and surprised when problems do happen, because they just know, okay, well, that's how it is in samsara. And then, so letter B there, it says, suffering and problems are a natural, inevitable part of life. It's better to expect them and to accept them. Okay, so a Buddhist, someone who's very familiar with Buddhist views, doesn't get so upset about problems. They don't have this attitude of, oh, everything is wonderful, life is wonderful, no bad thing should ever happen to me. They don't have that kind of attitude or expectation. So instead, they just know problems happen, and so that really helps them to be more calm and more accepting and not, I mean, of course, they still get upset. They still have unhappiness when problems happen, but not as much unhappiness as someone who has this kind of fantasy that problems should never happen. And then letter C says, instead of saying, why me, we can say, why not me? Because if we look around, we open our eyes and our ears and we look around, then it's clear that many, many, many other people have problems too. Sometimes when we have a problem, when something bad happens to us, we tend to feel, like I said, why me? Why is this happening to me? This isn't right. This isn't fair. But wait a minute, hang on, pause, and just look around and open your ears. And, it's obvious that other people have problems too. You are definitely not the only person in the world who has problems. And not only that, but the problems that you're experiencing are probably not as bad as the problems other people are experiencing, right? So other people have problems that are much greater, much worse than yours. And so that awareness can help us see our problems, our experiences in a different way, so that we don't get so upset about them, but we can, be more tolerant, more patient with our problems. So just for example, it was quite a few years ago now when there was, I think it was the first Iraq war. Anyway, there was one war happening in the Middle East, in Iraq, and there were many refugees. What was the name of those people? I forget the name. This particular group of people that were trying to escape from Iraq and Syria, and they were in the mountains. They were up in the mountains, and it was winter time. It was extremely cold, and they didn't have much shelter, and they didn't have much food and clean water and so forth. Oh, Kurds, that's right, the Kurdish people, I remember. And so, on TV, on the news, they were showing a lot of stories about these people. And my sister-in-law, who at that time she had a couple of small children, young children, and she heard that these people, these refugees, like the mothers, had to wash their children's clothes in puddles of water, freezing cold water, muddy water, but that was all they had to wash their children's clothes. And so when she saw that, she thought, oh, well, I shouldn't complain about having to wash my children's clothes because I have a washing machine. I have a washing machine and hot water. And, what have I got to complain about? So I guess she was feeling, unhappy that she had to do so many loads of laundry for her children. But when she realized what some mothers have to do, then she realized, oh, I have nothing to complain about. I'm actually very fortunate. So that's just one illustration of how when we look at the suffering and the problems that others are going through, then we can look at our situation in a different way and realize that what we consider to be a problem may not really be a problem at all. We're quite fortunate. Okay, so that's one attitude we might have, that Yeah, good to check if that's a realistic. Okay, then the second one, I think you need to go back up again. Sorry, you're going down too far. Please go back up. Okay, so the second one is problems are bad. There's nothing good about them. Okay, so this is another attitude we might have, and it's normal. Yeah, problems are things we don't want, things that go against how we want things to be. Yeah, so when they do happen, we tend to feel, oh no, this is wrong, this is bad, this is, and we don't see anything positive, anything good about problems. We see it as completely negative, completely useless. And so because of that view, then when problems do happen, then we tend to get upset. We tend to get unhappy and even angry. We may blame other people, or we try to escape. You know, different people have different ways to escape from problems. Some people drink. That's a very common. Have a drink. You know, a shot of whiskey or vodka or whatever, wine. No, that will make you feel better. As if that will take away the problem. Well, or people take drugs. Some people eat. Yeah, you go to the refrigerator, you find something to eat. Or, yeah, or we turn on the TV, distract ourselves with entertainment, or, you know, look at your phone or your iPad, your device, you know, what messages are coming in, what internet can I look at? So we kind of try to run away from the problem instead of facing it. We try to get away from it and make, you know, do something to make ourselves feel better. Okay, so what Buddhism says about this is that problems are not necessarily bad. Sorry. It all depends on our perspective, what we do with our thoughts, you know, how we look at problems, how we deal with them. They're not necessarily bad, and it's possible to learn from problems and grow from problems. Okay, so one example of this, somebody that I know, he got cancer when he was in his early 20s. And when I met him, he was older, but he said that that experience of having cancer was the best thing that happened to him in his life, which is kind of shocking because most people, yeah, cancer is like, just the word cancer is so scary and nobody wants to get cancer. But so it's quite surprising to hear him say that was the best thing that happened in his life. So I asked him why, and he said, well, when he got cancer, he had to go for treatment, and he was staying with his family, his parents and siblings, while he was getting treatment and recovering. And before that, he didn't have a very good relationship with his family. I guess there was a lot of conflict and unhappiness. So while he was staying with his family and getting treatment for cancer, they managed to work out their problems with each other, and they cleared away the problems, and they just were able to get a really nice relationship with each other. So that was very positive. And then another thing that happened was he got interested in meditation and in a spiritual path. And so he connected with Buddhism. He started doing Buddhist meditation and Buddhist practice, studying Buddhism. And that was so beneficial for his mind. And eventually, like when I met him, he was interested in becoming a monk. And he did. He became a monk, and then he went to one of the Tibetan monasteries and studied and became a geshe. Now he's a geshe. This is like a professor of Buddhist studies, and very happy, very, very, very happy person. So he said that experience, even though I'm sure in the beginning he wasn't happy to get cancer, but it turned out to be something very helpful, very beneficial. So there's lots of stories like that where something that appears to be bad and unwanted can turn out to be very helpful, very beneficial for us. Okay, so then what else do we have? Oh yeah, next point, if we could scroll down. So the next point is trying to escape from problems or blaming others for the problems or reacting with negative emotions. These don't help, and they just make things worse. Okay. So we probably all had experiences of this where we tried to escape from problems. Some problem came along in our life and we just felt, oh no, this is terrible, I don't want this, and we don't know what to do about it, and so we try to escape. And like I mentioned, there's different ways of escaping: drugs, alcohol, food, entertainment. Another thing people often do is make themselves busy. Yeah, they keep themselves busy working, cleaning the house, that's not bad. House needs to be cleaned sometimes. You can get a lot of work done. But if you're using that as a way to escape from problems, that means you're not really facing your problem. You're not really dealing with it. And some of these ways we try to escape from problems can lead to other problems, like alcoholism. Yeah, if people keep drinking whenever they have a problem, then they become an alcoholic. It becomes an addiction. And same with drugs. And so then they have another problem, problem of being addicted. And then, if you eat whenever you have a problem, then you may end up being overweight, and that can lead to other problems, like it can affect your health and so on. So it's good to look at what we do. What are our ways of managing when problems happen, and whether or not we try to avoid them, try to escape from them, and if that helps or not. And then blaming, that's another thing that we sometimes do. We feel upset. Oh, this terrible thing is happening and I don't want it to be happening. Who's to blame? Who's at fault for this? So we try to blame other people. And, people often blame their parents or their partner or their children. If you're a parent, you may blame your children. Or you may blame other friends or neighbors or the government, politicians. So, we're trying to find someone out there we can point our finger to and say, it's their fault. They're the ones who made this problem. So then, does that do any good? Is that helpful? To blame, and usually that involves anger. Yeah. Anger, complaining, criticizing. Okay, so what, is that helpful, or does that just make things worse? I just recently here in Shravasti Abbey, we had a weekend retreat on anger, how to work with anger. And so I was teaching different methods for working with anger. And one of the participants said that she had a niece who recently committed suicide. And the niece was an activist, And she was always working against various types of oppression that she observed in the world. And it seems her motivation was to be of benefit, but she had a lot of anger and extreme anger. And so her anger was clearly destructive, both to herself and to others. And the person who wrote this said she thinks that the anger was part of the reason for her committing suicide. So that's, one kind of worst case scenario of what can happen if we do have a lot of anger and we're blaming others for things that go wrong. Yeah. And so I guess this young woman just got so unhappy and upset and disillusioned that she ended her own life. Yeah, and negative emotions, getting caught up in negative emotions like anger and complaining and criticizing, and also, just becoming so unhappy that we feel despair. Yeah. Oh, the situation in the world, there's so many problems and so many bad people doing horrible things. It's just such a huge mess. There's no solution. There's nothing that can be done. It's hopeless. And so you can end up feeling despair, feeling depressed, feeling hopeless. And that's, I think, clearly not a helpful state of mind to be in. Yeah, you could end up like that young woman who committed suicide. So yeah, it's good to look at these ways that we sometimes react when problems happen and recognize that they're not helpful. And in fact, they make things worse. So it's like, there's the problem, whether it's a personal problem, something happening to you, or a problem in the world around. So there's that. Then on top of that, by the way we respond, the way we react, we may just be adding more layers of suffering, of problems. Yeah. Being angry, feeling despair, feeling hopeless, having thoughts of committing suicide. So it's like layers of additional problems build up on top of the first problem. And the Buddha gave some really nice teachings about this, which I'll share with you later. Very helpful of this kind of process. So it's normal. It's normal human way of reacting when there's problems. So it happened at the time of the Buddha. It happens now. Yeah. But the good thing is we can learn how to do things differently so that we can alleviate problems instead of making them worse. Okay, then, third attitude, number 3, is I can't change. I've always been like this, and I always will be like this. Okay, so this is what some people believe, and it's good to check if you have this belief as well. So when you hear, like what I've been talking about, that it's possible to change our way of thinking, to change our way of feeling, the thoughts, the emotions that we have with regard to problems. Some people think, no, I can't change. It's impossible to change. I've always been the way that I am, and I always will be the way that I am. It's impossible to change. So some people really believe that. They really believe it's impossible to change. And I think in the past, this kind of idea may have been influenced by science, neuroscience, because there was the belief that the brain was somehow fixed the way that it was. Like the word they use in English is hardwired, Like our brain is hardwired to have certain experiences, you know, fear, anxiety, anger, and so on. And that's just the way that our brain is, and we can't do anything about it, right? People used to believe that, including scientists. Then I think not so long ago, maybe in the 90s, people started realizing that that's not true, that the brain can change. And so now I think it's accepted that what they call neuroplasticity, that, yeah, it is possible to change the brain. So that's really good news. Although in Buddhism, we say that the mind and the brain are not really the same thing. The brain is this physical organ in our head made of neurons and so on. Whereas the mind, in Buddhism, when we talk about the mind is not a physical thing. So it isn't made of cells and molecules and atoms. So it's not at all made of any physical material parts. And so it isn't something that can be viewed with instruments, you know, different kinds of scientific instruments. It's not possible to see the mind because it doesn't have any physical properties. It can't be seen, it can't be touched. It's totally non-material, non-physical. And it's that part of us that knows, that experiences things. So it includes all of our thoughts and our emotions, as well as our perceptions when we, you know, see and hear and smell and taste and feel sensations in our body. That's actually our mind that is experiencing those things, not our brain. But mind and brain are very much interconnected, interdependent. They're not totally separate. I like to think of the example of a computer. You know, they talk about the hardware and the software. So the hardware of the computer would be, you know, the actual physical computer with all its parts, all the different wires and screws and the keyboard and the screen and so on, all the things that go into the computer. So that's the hardware of the computer. And then the software of the computer, these are the programs that we use to be able to write things or do spreadsheets, do internet and so forth. That's like the intelligence of the computer. So I think that's a little bit like an analogy of the brain and the mind. So the brain is like the hardware and the mind is the software. So the brain itself isn't able to function on its own, isn't able to know anything or experience anything, but it's actually the mind working with the brain that is able to have all these experiences like thinking and knowing and remembering and feeling emotions and perceiving and so forth. So yeah, that's just a little bit of explanation about the mind and the brain. So anyway, both the mind and the brain are changeable. It is possible to change the brain. It's possible to change the mind. And I have no doubt about that because I have seen it in my own experience. I've been learning Buddhism for more than 50 years now. And I can see big changes in myself, yeah, compared to the way that I was before. Like when I was young, teenager especially, I had a lot of problems, a lot of suffering, a lot of unhappiness, and difficulty getting along with people and so on. And so after learning Buddhism and learning meditation and practicing it all these years, I can see that I'm much happier now and much better able to get along with people, much better able to deal with problems and difficulties in life. So I have no doubt at all that it is possible to change. We can change ourselves, but it is necessary to believe that it's possible. Because if we think it's not possible, we won't even try. So I read about some research that was done where, there were two groups of people. There were students actually, and so one group were given articles to read, or they had to listen to talks which express this idea that, oh, we can't change ourselves. We're fixed the way that we are, and we just can't change. We just have to accept ourselves the way we are. So they were, given that kind of information. And then the other group of volunteers were given other information that it is possible to change. We can change ourselves, if we try, and so on and so on. And they found that these two groups of people responded very differently. The ones who thought it was impossible to change didn't even try. When they were given an opportunity to make some changes in their self, they didn't even try because they thought, oh, what's the use? I can't change, so not even worth trying. Whereas the other group who were given the positive information that it is possible to change, when they were given the opportunity to do something new and different, they were more enthusiastic about it because they thought, yes, I can change, I can be different, I can be better. And so that really shows that belief in the possibility of change is very important, very crucial. So that's something to check. If you do happen to have that idea that you can't change, then if you believe that, you won't try, or you might try, but you won't have much hope, much optimism about that possibility. And what Buddhism says in the file here, it says we can change. Our mind is impermanent, changing every moment. So the very nature of our mind is that it's changing. That's just its nature. It's changing every moment, in the sense that every single moment we have different thoughts, different feelings, different emotions, different experiences coming and going. And that's just the way it is. It's changing anyway by itself without even trying to make it change. But we can also learn to change our mind, to change our ways of thinking. We can develop new ways of thinking and new ways of responding to experiences like problems. So it's important to have belief in that, to have confidence in that, and try to be positive and optimistic rather than negative and pessimistic. So let's pause at this point and do a little bit of meditation on what I've just been talking about. So see if you can sit up straight, try to have your back straight, because that helps your mind to be more clear, more focused. But it's also important to be relaxed, not tight, tense. So let your body relax as much as possible. And now I'd like you to bring to mind some problem that might be going on in your life right now, or something that happened recently. Some unwanted, unpleasant experience that you went through. It doesn't need to be something big. It could just be something small, like, some little injury or the weather not being the way you want it to be. So, how did you react when this problem appeared? Were you able to accept it in a calm, open way? Or did you feel upset and have aversion, like, oh, I don't want this, I want it to go away? And maybe there was fear that this problem was going to be there forever, would never go away. Maybe there was anger at those you thought were responsible for the problem, blaming them, complaining, criticizing. Did you try to escape from the problem with food or alcohol or drugs or entertainment? So, if you did have any of those ways of reacting to the problem, just check to see if they were helpful. Did they really help? Or did they make things worse? And then ask yourself if you think it's possible to learn new ways of dealing with problems, difficulties. So instead of making things worse, you can manage the problems better and even turn them into something useful. Now, it does take time to learn these new ways and to train ourselves in them, practice them to get good at them. And so don't expect it's like magic, like instantly we'll be able to be happy instead of unhappy when problems happen. So it does take time. So check to see if you're willing to put in the time and energy that it takes to learn these new methods. Are there any questions so far about anything I've said that you don't understand or you'd like to ask about? If not, I can continue. I just want to give you a chance to ask any question you might have. Doesn't look like it. Okay.
We actually had a question through the chat, Venerable.
Huh?
We actually had a question through the chat.
Oh,
Someone
okay.
is asking the difference between the mind and the soul. You want me to repeat the question, Venerable?
Sorry?
Someone was asking the difference between the mind and the soul.
The difference between the mind and... I didn't hear what you said, sorry.
The soul. That's my
Soul.
question. Yeah.
S-O-U-L. Oh, the mind and the soul. Oh, good question. Yeah, traditionally in the Buddhist teachings, we don't talk about a soul. In India, at the time of the Buddha and before the Buddha, there were many religious teachers, philosophers, and They had different views, different philosophies that they would teach, and also different kinds of meditation practices that they would teach. And it was very common for these Indian masters to believe in a soul, although they use the word Atman. That's the Hindu word, Sanskrit word, which is roughly equivalent to the idea of a soul in Christianity or other religions. And the Buddha was unique. What he discovered in his practice, his meditation, was that there wasn't such a thing as what the others believed in and called an Atman, because they believed the Atman or soul to be something permanent, unchanging, something that existed forever, something that was independent, existed on its own independently, and also unitary or whole, like one whole monolithic thing. So that's how they described the Atman. And they taught to their followers that there was such a thing. And when the Buddha learned that, he studied with some of those teachers and learned their teachings. But when he was meditating and looking into his mind, his experiences, he discovered there was no such thing as this permanent, independent, unitary soul or Atman. And he also discovered that if we believe in that, if we grasp at that, with strong belief, then that actually leads to suffering. That actually is the main cause for the suffering that we experience in life. It leads us to have anger at anyone who we see as harmful, to have attachment, desire, clinging to anyone, anything we see as attractive. And so he saw that as the main cause of samsara and all the suffering and problems of samsara. And he realized the absence, the emptiness of that kind of Atman or soul or self, another word that's sometimes used as self. And so, that's a very core teaching in Buddhism, that there is no such thing as a permanent, unitary, independent self, soul, Atman. But the mind, we do have a mind, and the mind is something different than a soul. The mind is impermanent, like I already mentioned. It's not permanent, but it's impermanent and it's always changing. It does continue. Like when we die, our body is left behind and becomes, a dead body, a corpse. But our mind continues, and it takes another life, another rebirth. And eventually our mind will attain enlightenment, the state the Buddha attained. So the mind is something that continues, doesn't go out of existence, but it isn't the same as a permanent soul or self, because people who believe in that tend to believe that is who I really am. That's like my essence. And they see it as something permanent and unchanging, the real me. And Buddhism says, no, that's not true. The mind is not like that. Because for one thing, if you think about it, our mind goes from one life to another. And in each lifetime, we take on a new identity. We're like a different person. Okay, maybe in my last lifetime, I was a man living in Africa. Going hunting. I don't know. That's a wild thing. But, I was like a completely different person in my last life. And then now I'm in this life. I'm a woman. I'm a Buddhist nun. And then when this life ends, my mind will go to another life. Maybe I'll be born as an elephant. So then I will have a totally different identity, a totally different life. Okay, so our mind is like that. It isn't fixed as being a certain way for all of time, but it's always going through changes depending on the life we are in, depending on where we are born, our parents, and different experiences in life and so on. So I hope that answers the question. This is a big, a big topic in Buddhism, this what's called selflessness or non-self. It's a very difficult topic to learn about, but it's also very important and also very interesting. It's also called emptiness. If you ever hear about emptiness, the term emptiness, that's also talking about this this topic. Is that helpful? I hope that answers the question. Anyone else?
There is another question in the chat. Cyril asks if what is conserved and what is not conserved in the mind after death.
What is conserved and not conserved? That's a good question. Well, yeah, in Tibetan Buddhism, they have a wonderful explanation about the whole process of dying and then, leaving this body, this life, and going to the next body, the next life. It's a rather complicated explanation, but anyway, it's there if you do want to look into that. But to answer that question, what remains or what goes with the mind from this life to the next life are mainly imprints of actions that we have done, imprints of emotions we have experienced. So, for example, and this is something you can see with little children, like very young children, some children show a lot of kindness and a lot of compassion, like they really care about others, and also they care about little animals and little insects. They don't want to harm them, they want to help them, and so on. Whereas other children show a very different kind of nature. Maybe they have a lot of anger and harmfulness. They actually even enjoy harming little animals, little insects. They get into fights with their siblings and their friends, and they like to bully. And so they sometimes show those characteristics even when they're very, very young, as infants. And that's just one example. But yeah, again, you can see with small children that they have certain characteristics that aren't necessarily present in the parents. And so according to Buddhism, those characteristics are a carryover from past lives. So the child who's very kind and compassionate, they were like that in their past life. They were probably very kind and very compassionate, and that was their main characteristics. So even in the next life, they retain that kind of characteristic. Oh, and the one who's harmful, who's cruel, who enjoys harming others, was probably like that in their past life. And so again, that carries over to the next life. So that's just one example of what can go from one life to the next. I have met people who are like natural born vegetarians. So they're born in families, in societies and families where everybody eats meat. Yeah, meat eating is very big, and they don't like to eat meat, even from the time they're very, very young. They just feel, ooh, meat, I don't want to eat that. And that's not coming from their parents, right? Not coming from their society. It's coming from, inside of themselves. So they were probably vegetarian in their past life, strong vegetarian, and that carries over to the next life. So, yeah, so imprints of our behavior and attitudes and characteristics, those carry over. Also, karma. So, when we do actions, those leave imprints on our mind. We call it karma. And then those karmic imprints go from one life to the next, and they are the main factors that determine the kind of experiences we have. So good karma leads to good experiences, bad karma leads to bad experiences. So those also go from one life to the next. And I mean, memories of past life also go. They do say that we have within our mind the memories of our past lives, but most people are not able to access those memories. But some do. There's many stories of children talking about their past lives, and they can sometimes give detailed information about their past life, sometimes their name, where they lived, family members, and so on. Usually this happens between the ages of 2 and 5. After that, their mind gets more caught up in this present life and they lose those memories. But very young children often can remember their previous life. And we can too. It's said that through the practice of meditation, by meditating and making our mind more clear, then it's also possible for us to have memories of our past lives. So they're there, they're stored there, but not always accessible. Catherine, you have a question?
Comment peut-on, si j'ai un karma négatif, est-ce que le chemin du bouddhisme peut me permettre de modifier ce karma pour qu'il, dans les vies futures, je ne retombe pas dans les mêmes travers? Est-ce que vous avez compris ma question?
Is someone going to translate that? I can't hear the translation.
How to transform our negative karma to the future life? Can we work with Buddhism or other tradition to this negative karma becomes a positive karma?
So how can we transform our negative karma and transform into positive, make our experiences positive, something like that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so yes, definitely. That's really what Buddhism is all about. Karma isn't fate. Sometimes people think that karma is fate, meaning, oh, you created some bad karma, and so you have the fate to have bad things happen to you, and there's nothing that can be done to change that. That isn't the case. It is possible to change our karma. We can purify our karma. So like in this life, if we did some bad things and we feel a lot of regret, we can purify that karma. We can also purify karma from past lives. Even if we can't remember exactly what we did, we can still guess and purify all that karma as well. So karma can definitely be purified. Even terrible things like murder, there's no karma that is so bad that it can't be purified. So yeah, we can definitely purify karma. We can change our karma. I mean, again, it takes time, it takes effort. It's not like magic, instant. But if we work at it, we can definitely change our karma, and we can change ourselves, become a very different person, someone who doesn't do harmful things and instead does a lot of positive things, virtuous things, beneficial things. So that's definitely possible. Is that answering the question? Yeah. Okay, that's a good question.
Oui, tout à fait, ça répond. Yes, you answer to my question. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, well, we don't have any more questions, but we also don't have much more time. We just have a few minutes left. Maybe I'll just mention one thing that may not take too much time, and that is that with regard to problems, sometimes when people start doing meditation and spiritual practice, they have the idea that from now on, I should have it easy, I should have good experiences, no more problems will happen to me. And I guess it makes sense because you may think, okay, earlier in my life, I did a lot of harmful things. I wasn't a very good person. So it's understandable that bad things would happen to me. But now I'm trying to be good and I'm doing the right things. I'm on a good path. So everything should go well. I shouldn't have any more problems. So this is not true. So just be careful about that kind of attitude. According to Buddhism, just because we start practicing meditation, we start practicing a spiritual path, that doesn't mean that all of our karma has been purified and goes away. It doesn't work like that. We still have a lot of karma from the past that can ripen and cause difficulties and bad experiences. So we shouldn't expect that there won't be any more problems just because we're meditating, just because we're being a good person, we're doing good things, not doing bad things. That isn't enough for all problems to disappear. Yeah. And you can look what happened to Tibet, right? The majority of people in Tibet were Buddhist and were very devoted, very dedicated to, studying and practicing Buddhism. And look at the terrible things that happened to them. Yeah, with the invasion of the Chinese, and many people were killed, many people were put into prison, tortured, and so on, including lamas, right? Lamas, monks, nuns, they were actually targeted by the Chinese. So they didn't lose their faith because they know about karma. They know that, okay, yeah, I'm practicing Dharma, I'm being a good person, but I had many lives in the past and I created a lot of bad karma, and so that's why I'm now going through these difficulties. It's my bad karma that's ripening. And they also have the view that when we do go through problems and difficulties, this is a way of getting rid of the bad karma. It's like purifying the bad karma. That it's like paying off debts. Okay, karma is a little bit like having debts. And so when bad things happen, this is like you're paying off your debts. And that's a good thing because then you don't have those debts anymore. Yeah. And so they can even feel kind of positive and happy that they're getting rid of their bad karma. So that's just one thing I wanted to mention. We can discuss it more later if you have questions about it. But it often happens that when people start practicing Dharma, they think, oh, now everything should go well. I shouldn't have any more problems. And then when a problem does happen, they may think, what? This isn't supposed to happen to me. Why is this happening to me? So be careful about that. Okay, so let's stop here. We have a break of an hour, and then we'll come back and look at some more of this material.
Thank you.
So, yeah, let's just take a moment to mentally dedicate the positive energy we've created so far, listening, thinking about, meditating on these ideas with a good motivation. So we created some merit, positive energy, and let's share that merit with others, wishing that it will bring peace and happiness to all beings everywhere. Okay, so thank you. Have a nice dinner.